Hey, welcome to our quick mini project. And the objective of this project, or the challenge for this project, is to create some mini dice that there's a button and it rolls the dice, and the dice are actually created all using JavaScript. Hey, I'm going to give you a quick preview of what we're going to be creating in the upcoming lesson. So this is going to be a dice roll where we've got a button, and when you press the button, it's going to create a dice where we've got the squares for 3 and 1. So in this case, the roll was a 3 and a 1. So we've got the pattern up here for the array pattern of where the dots go. Roll the dice again, a 1 and a 5. So we got the output here within the console, and as well as we've got the visuals for the users that are rolling the dice. So this is all created just using JavaScript. So there's nothing else but JavaScript. So when we create all of the HTML, this is all created using JavaScript. So we're creating the button as well as we're creating the HTML and applying all of the styling, all done via JavaScript. So this is all dynamic. So every time we roll it, it updates and visually represents the dice that have been rolled. So we've got 2 dice here, and we can actually, with our code, it's fairly dynamic where we can create multiple dice. So it's simply generating the dice for the various areas that we've already created within the JavaScript. So let's get started and create this from scratch. And as you can see, there's no HTML here, that when the page loads, it's all done with just JavaScript. So let's get to it, and we want to have two dice or two die showing up on the screen, and also one button that we can click. And the JavaScript has to generate the dice, and not using any styling, only just JavaScript. So let's get to it. So first of all, let's create our first object, and that's going to be a button. So document create element, and the element that we're creating is a button. So we're going to make this clickable, and we'll apply some styling to that as well. So the button text content is going to just say roll dice. And let's create a main container. I'll call it play area, and the document, so create element, and the element that we're creating is going to be a div. So we create that. And now let's add the play area to our screen. So let's create the play area and add it to the screen. So document body. So body already exists as an object. That's where I'm able to add and append the play area. And I'm actually, if I want it to move it above the JavaScript, I can use prepend. So that will actually place it above. So just to show you what I mean. So we want it to have the div sitting above the script tags. So that's where we use prepend. If we use append, it will place it afterwards. And we also want to add in to the play area, we want to append and add in the button object. So that will show a button on the page, which just shows up. It doesn't do anything quite yet. So going back into the code, so we need a way to generate some dice. And we know with dice, we want to make it visual so that we see the dice. So we're going to have to generate this, and using our JavaScript code in order to do that. So first of all, we need to have 2 container areas for the dice. So let's construct those 2 areas. And we're just going to create them separately. We'll have area 1 and document create element, and the element is going to be a div. And then we're going to do the same thing for area 2 and also a div. And then also using the play area, we're going to append both of the dice. So we have an option here to add in a main container for this element, and we can do that, or we don't have to. So it's up to us how we do that. We can just have them both floating beneath, or we can have the main container area. So if you do want to add a container, we just need to create another element and another div so that we can contain this content. Then we're going to be applying the styling. So player area append container, and then within the container we need to append area 1 and container append area 2. And we don't have any content in them yet, so let's add in some content. So area 1, text content, first dice. And we're going to be updating this visually. And that can be for the second dice. So this is just so that we see what it looks like. I want to add in some borders around those elements. So let's create a function to add borders. So call it function, add borders, because we do have two elements. So whatever element we want to add a border to, we're going to select the element that gets passed in, style, border, and one pick solid. How about we just do a black border? We could also make it more dynamic. We could pass in a few other options, style, and we'll also add in some padding to it. So 10 pixels of padding. So let's add borders to each one of those elements. And add in borders. And then we can also do more complex styling if needed. How about also let's update the font size. So style, font size, and set the font size to 1.5 EM. So this is just expecting a string value to be returned. So we refresh it and we've got the two font areas. So I also want to set some more styling where I want to set the width of each one of these, and I want to equal that width to be 50%. And we are already going to have a problem because we do have a border, so we can just update it to 40%. And also let's take the element and style, float, and let's left float it. So that way they're going to be in line with each other. So we got our first dice, our second dice. Let's set up an element, style, height, and let's equal the height to be, how about we do 300 pixels. So maybe that's a little bit too big. And actually, instead of guessing, we're going to just calculate whatever the width is because we've already set it to 40%. So we can take the element and use its offset width value. So it's going to return back the offset width of the element. So when we resize, we see we get a height of 170. If we resize again, we get 209, so because it's slightly bigger. So the size of it is now based on how wide of the screen we have it. So let's go back in, and that's setting up the two dice areas. So now we have to populate it with some data. And what we want to do is we want to calculate out what values we need for having the different dice. And we also want to add in the ability to roll. So let's first set up the event listener for button. So let's go down here and take button. We're adding an event listener, and the event is going to listen for a click, and whenever it gets clicked, then we are going to be rolling the dice. So what do we want to happen when we roll the dice? So what we want to do is we want to add content into text area 1 and area 2, and we also want to roll random values for those. So let's take we create a function that's gonna roll a value, and it's gonna roll a value into each one of those. So we've got area 1 and area 2. So we're gonna just add in values into those, and we're gonna run this function. So it's gonna roll a value, so it's gonna assign a new value to each one of those. And then we can use the console log and use area 1. And I'll just output whatever val is going to be. So we're going to update the area objects with vals with values. That's what we're going to do over here. So let's select area 1 because it's a global object, and use the math random. And what do we want to do with the math random? We want to also use the math floor. Actually, we need the math floor. So actually, we're getting the math random, and the math floor just needs to be reversed there. So within here is math random, because the math random itself, you can see in the console what the math random does is when we go into the console, type in math random, it's going to return back a random number. So if we want to multiply it by 6, because we've got 6 dice, so it's going to return back a random number from 0 to 5.999, and that means that we also need to times it by 6, and then we need to add 1 to it. So we also need to round this down to the nearest value. So that's what math floor is going to do, where it's going to round it down. So multiply it by 6, and we're going to add 1. And we can do this exact same thing for area 2. So let's assign values to those. So let's see what happens. We roll the dice, and now we're getting the random values being shown in there. We can also, right now, we can update what is contained within the text content area for these elements. And of course, we are going to be generating out what is going to look like dice, and that's going to be all using JavaScript. So we can really simply just kind of do this where we've got the area 1 and the area 2 and getting the area 2 value. So the val is just going to be part of the element object. So it's not already a predefined value like we do have for text content, but this is one that we've just created. So it's going to sit within these objects, and it's kind of hidden away so we're not able to see it. So now whenever we roll, we're going to get the values of the rolls being shown there. So we want to actually generate out what's going to look like dice. So it's going to be a little bit more complex, and for that we're going to have to update the inner HTML. So let me update these to update the inner HTML. And we're going to create a function that is going to generate what's going to look like a value on the element, and creating the value gen dice, and it's going to need a value coming in. And so it's going to return back the HTML content for it. So using the generating the dice values. And for here, we're going to return back some HTML content. And for now, we're just going to return back the value of the dice. So it's still returning back those values. So now we want to generate some HTML for this. So next, let's create what the dice are going to look like. So depending on the dots. So for the dice view, we'll create a multi-dimensional array. And then within here, we'll have what we want the dice to look like. So we need to create 6 of those. So when we think of how this is going to look, if we think of it in a grid-like format where we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 across the grid, we want to, what values do we want to color in depending on what this looks like? So let's do 5 for 1, and for number 2, we want to color in 1 and 9. For number 3, we want to do 1, 5, and 9. For number 4, we want to do 1, 3, 7, and 9. And that's 4. So 5 is also going to have the center dot colored in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I've got one extra array here. And for 6, we're going to color in everything. So all of the spots on the dice are going to get colored in. So that means that 4 and 6 and 7, 8, 7 and 9 are going to get colored in as well. So let's add these and coloring these in. So now we've got a returned value for the array, and we need to associate the array value with whatever value is being passed in here. So let's make a quick adjustment to here, and we're not going to add the +1 because arrays are 0 based, so that whenever we're generating these values, we've got the, and of course we can add in the +1 if we need to. So right now we're just generating these random values, and then we're using these to make sure we've got what looks like dice being output. So let's loop through. Let x equal 0, and while x is less than 9, and x equals x plus 1. And this is where we're going to construct the HTML that we're returning. And that's going to be the HTML that we're going to return. And then just below, we're going to do HTML plus HTML and close off the div. So let's construct what we want the elements to look like. So we want to have a series of spans there, and they got to be 33 across. We also can select which pattern we want from the dice view. So let's do that first, where we'll take the dice view and check to see what pattern we have. So I'll just call this temp array and associate that to dice view, and we'll pull back whatever value we have. And right now I can add that to the HTML just so that we can see what's being output, or we'll just output into the console. So console log and have the temporary array. So this is the array for whatever dice value we've got. So roll the dice. So we've got a 4 and a 6, and these are the patterns that we want to output. And of course, these numbers are 1 less because these are going to be corresponding to the value without the +1 that we just removed. So we know what we've got, what we want the pattern to look like. So we want to check to see if a value is included in the array, and as we loop through and add in the spans. So let's do that, where we've got HTML equals HTML plus span, and close off the span. So we roll the dice and we get these spans. So I want to also apply some style to the span with 33% and update the display inline block. We could also create a class for this, and that's probably going to be a better option for us to just create a class for these. So right now we're just adding in the x's, and then we'll update and we'll create a class and we can apply the class. So what we want is the x to show on the ones that we want it to show on. And the way that we do that is we can check to see if it's in the array, and if it is, then we add that value in. So let's temp array includes, and the value that it includes is going to be x, and we're actually have these numbered, so we don't have starting at 0. So let's update this, and it should be 1 to 10. So if it includes x, then we're going to add this value, and if it doesn't include x, then the HTML value is not going to have anything there. It's just going to have a blank space. So let's see what that looks like. So we roll. So the first value is going to be a 1, and the second value is a 4. So let's create a style. And I know I said we want to strictly do it with HTML. So of course we can add in the additional style properties where we could have a height. So how about we set it to 100 pixels. So we have predefined widths and heights. It's going to be a little bit easier. So 100 pixels. And also let's do one other update as well. So I'm going to pull all of this out so I don't have to keep updating them. And I'm going to do it just outside, where I'm going to update the HTML with whatever value we've got. And I'm going to set that using the template literals. And whatever the value is that we're creating. So let's create a temporary value and just set it to be blank, and so that we can use this temporary value and add that into the code. So it's going to add that into the HTML. So this way we only have to reset the temporary value, and I can just leave it as a space. So only if the temporary value includes, then we'll update it as an X. So let's see what that looks like. Oops, and it looks like we've got a syntax error. So invat unexpected token, line 44. And that's because of brackets, it automatically closes that, so it added in the extra backtick. So let's see what's happening here. So these are supposed to be in position 1 and 9. So right now it's, let's see what's happening here, and that's because our main container should be set to 300 pix. So we shouldn't be creating it dynamically. So let's update that as well. So instead of this and this, I'm gonna set the width to be 300 pix. And that's why that is not fitting properly inside of there. And then we can also set the height to 300 pix. I'll leave the calculation in there for your reference. So if you ever do want to calculate the value dynamically, you can do that as well. And L style, let's update the background color. And I'm going to set it to a hex color, so DDD. Let's see what that looks like. And so now we're quite a bit bigger. And I do have the screen zoomed in. That's why it's coming in so big. So let's try to roll the dice. So we got a 2, and then we got a 9. So they took up a little bit more space than I was expecting. Let's make the final adjustments. And instead of outputting a value, this is going to be the background color. So instead of having an X there, we're just going to keep that empty and just have just a blank span. And we're going to resize the width and the height of it. So again, we're not going to need an X, but how about we include a color for the background color. So let's set the width, and we've got 300 pix to play with. So let's do 90 and 90. So that would give us an option to do some margins. Let's also add in some other parameters. We've got the border radius. So that will turn it slightly rounded, but we do 20 pix for that. And then let's set lastly the background color. And now this is going to be whatever the value of the temp val was. So we've got temp val there. And also one other thing, let's go ahead and add in a margin. So about 2 pix margin sounds just about right. So now let's go back out and we'll try it. So now we rolled ones, we rolled a 1 and a 5, a 6 and a 3, and a 2 and a 1, a 3 and a 5. We can see that in the output there. So that's it. So we were able to complete the dice and the rolling of the dice all using JavaScript. And also this probably looks better as white. So make sure that it also matches the background. So let's update this background to be white as well. So refresh. So there's our dice. And also if we want to make the border slightly and style. And these are just some finishing touches. So border radius. Let's do 10 pix for the border radius. So then the entire dice are going to have border radius around it. And we might also even want to do a little tweak on the size. And you can make whatever adjustments you want. So making it fully dynamic and resize is quite a bit of a challenge. So it's a little bit easier just to do it this way. And also let's create some margins so that they're not right next to each other. So creating 10 pic margin. So that will give us some spacing between each one of the dice. So there we go. We've completed creating the dice all using JavaScript. Now it's up to you. Have some fun with it, customize it, and make it your own.